My sister told my fiancé he has a secret child he never told you about. She even faked messages and photos. My fiancé almost called off the wedding until she noticed one detail in the screenshots that exposed everything. My name is Marcus. I'm 32. I'm an accountant, which is the kind of career that teaches you to notice when numbers don't add up, though it took me 30 years to apply that skill to my own family. I make $95,000 a year. I own a car, rent an apartment, have a retirement fund I've been feeding since my first real paycheck. And until 8 months ago, I was engaged to a woman named Diane who is a physical therapist, smarter than me in every way that counts. And the reason this story ends the way it does instead of the way my mother planned. I need to tell you about my family before any of this makes sense, because the lie my sister told didn't come from nowhere. It came from a system, and that system has a name, and her name is Gloria. Gloria is my mother. She is 61 years old. She has been married to my father Frank for 38 years. She raised 3 children, my older brother David, my older sister Michelle, and me. From the outside, Gloria is a devoted mother who sacrificed everything for her family, who cooked every meal, attended every school event, and held the household together through sheer force of will. From the inside, Gloria is a woman who believes that love is a form of management and that her children's lives are projects she has the right to direct, approve, or cancel. Gloria never liked Diane. She never said it directly. She said it in the spaces around words, in the questions that weren't really questions, in the way she'd pause before saying, "She seems nice," as if she were translating from a language she didn't speak. Diane is not from the same cultural background as our family. Gloria never said that was the problem. She said things like, "Family traditions matter," and "It's easier when people understand where you come from," and "I just want you to be with someone who fits." Diane heard all of it. She understood all of it. She chose to be gracious about it because she loved me, and because she believed that time and proximity would soften Gloria's resistance. Diane was wrong about that. Time didn't soften Gloria. It gave her time to plan. My sister Michelle is 36. She's a stay-at-home mother of 2. She has been Gloria's project and Gloria's instrument for as long as I can remember, and I say that with more sadness than anger because I've come to understand that Michelle didn't choose the role she plays in this family. She was built for it the way you build a tool, shaped to fit a specific hand. My brother David is 38. He's been estranged from the family for 6 years. The official story is that David chose his wife Sonia over the family, which is what Gloria told everyone and what everyone believed, because Gloria is the kind of woman whose version of events becomes the only version if you don't fight for your own. I believed it too. For 6 years, I believed my brother walked away because he was selfish. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. 3 weeks before my wedding, Diane came home from work and she was different. Not angry, not sad. Something in between that doesn't have a word. Something that lives in the space where trust is still technically alive, but the machines are doing most of the work. She sat at the kitchen table with her coat still on and her keys still in her hand, like she'd forgotten the sequence of things you do when you arrive at a place you're not sure is yours anymore. She said, "I need to show you something, and I need you to not talk until I'm done." She laid out printed screenshots on the table. Text conversations between me and a woman named Vanessa, discussing a child, a daughter named Lily, complete with the kind of mundane co-parenting details that make fiction feel real. School pickup schedules, a pediatrician appointment, a birthday present discussed over text with the casual shorthand of 2 people who've been sharing a child for years. Photos of a toddler, maybe 2 years old, brown eyes, curly hair, with features that could resemble mine if you were already looking for the resemblance. A contact number for the mother, and the centerpiece, a message thread where I apparently confessed to Michelle that I had a daughter I'd been hiding from Diane and everyone else, that I was scared she'd leave if she knew, that I couldn't lose her, but couldn't keep lying. The screenshots were detailed. The language sounded like me in the way that a good impression sounds like the person it's imitating. Right rhythm, wrong soul. Whoever built this had studied how I communicate and reverse-engineered a version of me that was close enough to pass a first reading. Diane's engagement ring was off her finger and sitting on the table next to the screenshots. She'd already been crying. She said Michelle had brought the evidence to her at her office that afternoon, sat across from her in the break room, cried about how heartbroken she was, and begged Diane to confront him before the wedding. I looked at the screenshots. I had never seen that woman. I had never fathered a child. The messages were fiction, but they were detailed, and they were carefully constructed, and if you didn't know me, if you didn't know the specific way I text and the specific way I don't, they were convincing enough to end a relationship. Diane said, "Tell me this isn't real." I said it wasn't. She said, "Prove it." And then she showed me what she'd already found, because Diane is not the kind of woman who collapses and waits to be rescued. She's a physical therapist who reads digital imaging documentation and medical charts every day, who spots inconsistencies in MRI reports the way a mechanic hears a bad cylinder, and something in that professional training kicked in before her heart had time to override it. She pointed to the contact number listed for the mother, area code 847. She said, "That's a northern suburbs code. You don't know anyone in that area." She was right. But Gloria's sister Rosa lives in Schaumburg, area code 847. Diane had already checked. She'd Googled the area code, cross-referenced it against the family contact list she'd been given for wedding invitations, and found the match in under 3 minutes. 3 weeks of fabrication on one side, 3 minutes of detective work on the other. That's the gap my sister didn't plan for. She prepared for grief, not for analysis. Diane called the number right there at the kitchen table. Rosa answered. Confused, Diane identified herself and asked if Rosa knew anything about a woman named Vanessa or a child connected to me. Rosa said she didn't. And then Rosa's voice changed, shifted into something between panic and guilt, and she said, "Oh God." She actually did it. Rosa started talking fast, the way people talk when the weight of staying quiet suddenly becomes heavier than the weight of speaking. She said Gloria had approached her 2 months ago and asked her to pretend to be a friend of a woman your nephew got pregnant. She said she refused. She said Gloria told her Michelle would handle everything. Rosa assumed the plan had died. She didn't know they'd kept her phone number on the fake screenshots. 1 digit. The entire multi-week operation was undone because somebody forgot to swap out Rosa's real number. Then Rosa said, "I wasn't the first person she asked. Gloria had approached a distant cousin first, who refused and told her husband. Then a church friend, who said she'd pray about it, and then stopped answering Gloria's calls. 3 people were recruited for this operation before it even launched. 2 said no and moved on with their lives. Rosa said no and kept every text message Gloria had sent her about the plan because she had a bad feeling and couldn't bring herself to delete them. She forwarded those messages to Diane within the hour. Gloria's own words, her own instructions, her own timeline. The architect's blueprints, delivered by the one person who kept receipts. I called Michelle. Diane said, "Let me." She had a plan I didn't see coming. She called Michelle herself and said, in a voice so calm it almost scared me, that she just wanted to understand what happened before making any decisions about the wedding. She said she wasn't angry. She said she thought maybe there was a reasonable explanation. She said she wanted to hear Michelle's side before she did anything drastic. Michelle, who had spent the past 3 hours waiting for the explosion that hadn't come, was so relieved to hear Diane being reasonable that she started talking immediately. And she didn't stop for 12 minutes. She explained that Gloria had planned everything. That Gloria found the fake text generator app online and showed Michelle how to use it. That Gloria wrote the draft messages and Michelle typed them into the app. That the photos were pulled from a co-worker's social media account. That there were 6 different versions of the fake conversation because Gloria kept revising them, changing the emotional tone, adjusting the details, making each draft more convincing than the last. Michelle described which details were Gloria's additions and which were her own. She described the timeline. She described the rehearsals. She described how Gloria coached her on what to say to Diane when she delivered the screenshots. Cry first, then show the evidence. Don't answer questions, just cry more. Diane was recording the entire call on her phone. 12 minutes and 40 seconds of Michelle disassembling the scheme while believing she was talking her way out of trouble. Every sentence was a confession. Every detail was a nail. And Michelle didn't realize she was building the case against herself until it was already built. That evening, I called David. My brother. The one who'd been gone for 6 years. The one I'd been told walked away from the family because he was selfish, because he chose his wife Sonia over blood, which is the version Gloria distributed and which the family absorbed without question because that's how Gloria's narratives work. They arrive before any competing version and they never leave room for one. I told David everything. The screenshots, the fake child, Rose's confession, Diane's recording, the printer script. The line was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call was still connected. Then David said, in a voice that sounded like something had been unsealed in him after 6 years, "She did the same thing to me, Marcus. Different story. Same method. Mom told her to do it. I couldn't prove it, so I just left. 6 years. My brother had been gone for 6 years because Gloria ran the same operation on his relationship with Sonia. David's version was a rumor about Sonia's past that Gloria manufactured and Michelle delivered to the family. No screenshots, no fake child, just whispers precise enough to make everyone look at Sonia differently and consistent enough that David couldn't identify a single source to confront. Every trail led back to someone in the family heard, and nobody would say who. He gave up. He took Sonia and their daughter and drove away from the family. And for 6 years I believed he was the one who'd broken something. He wasn't. He was the one who'd been broken. Sonia stayed with him. They rebuilt, slowly, in a different city, with no family support, because Gloria made sure there was none to give. David lost his mother, his sister, his brother, and his extended family over a lie his mother scripted and his sister delivered. And nobody in that family, including me, ever picked up the phone and asked for his side of the story. That's the part one carry. Not what Gloria did. What I didn't do. I drove to my parents' house the next day. Not to confront Gloria. I wasn't ready for that. I went to see Frank. My father is 63, retired mechanic, a man who communicates primarily through silence and engine maintenance and the occasional sentence that lands like a wrench dropped on concrete. He was in the garage. He's always in the garage. What I didn't know then, and learned later in a way that broke something in me I didn't know was intact, is that Frank had been sleeping on a cot in that garage for 4 months. Not because of any single argument. Because his marriage to Gloria had been silently disintegrating for years, one project at a time, one controlled outcome at a time, one child's life redirected at a time, and Frank, who has never been able to stop Gloria from doing anything, but has also never been willing to pretend he doesn't see it, just withdrew, room by room, year by year, until the only space left in his own house that didn't have Gloria's fingerprints on it was a concrete floor with a workbench and a camping cot and a space heater he ran in winter. I told him what happened. All of it. The screenshots, Diane, Rosa, the texts. He listened the way Frank listens, which is completely still, like a man hearing a sound he's been waiting for. When I finished, he walked to his workbench, opened the second drawer from the top, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out to me without a word. It was a printed document, a script, dialogue for a phone call between the mother's friend and Diane, talking points for if the fiancé calls to verify the child, a list of my relationship timeline dates so the story would match the right years, and annotations in the margins in Gloria's handwriting. Small notes. Timing cues. Pause here for emotion. If she asks about custody, say it's informal. Don't mention Marcus by full name until she asks. Stage directions for a performance designed to end my marriage before it started. Frank had found it in the home office printer tray 3 weeks earlier. The timestamp on the print job was 6:14 a.m., before anyone else in the house was awake. Gloria had printed her script, taken it upstairs, and left one copy in the tray. Frank found it, read it, didn't fully understand what it was for, and put it in his workbench drawer the way Frank puts everything, quietly, without drama, in a place where it would wait until it was needed. Then he said something I'd been carrying in the back of my head for 6 months without knowing its weight. He said, "I told you to keep your girl close." I meant it. He had. At a family dinner, months ago, in this same garage, away from everyone, he'd pulled me aside and said, "Keep your girl close. Not everyone in this house wants what you want." I'd laughed. I thought he was being dramatic in his quiet, frank way. He wasn't. He couldn't tell me what Gloria was planning because he didn't know the specifics. But he knew the shape of it. He'd been married to the woman for 38 years. He knew when she was building something. He just never knew what until the building was finished. The photos in the screenshots were real photos of a real child. Her name was Amara, and her mother's name was Keisha, and she was a single mom who worked at the office where Michelle's husband Robert was employed. Michelle had pulled the photos from Keisha's private social media without permission or knowledge. When Keisha found out, through the investigation that followed, that her daughter's face had been used to fabricate a fake paternity scheme to destroy a stranger's wedding, she contacted a lawyer. She didn't care about our family drama. She cared that someone used her 2-year-old daughter as a prop and a fraud. The potential civil suit against Michelle and Gloria added an external legal pressure that nobody in the family had anticipated. You can explain away family betrayal as a misunderstanding. You can't explain away using a stranger's child's photos in a forgery when that stranger has retained counsel. The wedding was 5 weeks away after all of this surfaced. We didn't postpone. We adjusted. Gloria was uninvited. Michelle was uninvited. Frank was invited. David was invited. But before any of that happened, before the guest list was rewritten and the seating chart was rebuilt and the security team was hired, Diane and I sat on our apartment floor on a Wednesday night with the evidence spread around us like wreckage, and we didn't speak for a long time. The recording of Michelle's confession was on her phone. Rose's text messages were printed on the coffee table. The printer script was in a folder. The screenshots were still on the kitchen table where this all started. And between us, on the carpet, was Diane's engagement ring, which she'd taken off 4 days earlier and hadn't put back on. She said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it without trying to make me feel better." I said, "Okay." She said, "Did any part of you know your family was capable of this?" I thought about it honestly. I thought about Gloria's comments about Diane not fitting. I thought about Frank's warning in the garage. I thought about David disappearing 6 years ago and nobody asking why. I said, "I think I knew something was wrong. I didn't know it was this." She said, "That's not the same as not knowing." She was right. It wasn't. We sat with that for a while. Then she said, "I'm not leaving. But I need you to understand that I'm choosing you over a family that tried to erase me. And I need that to mean something to you every single day, not just today." I said it would. She picked up the ring, put it on, and said, "Then we're getting married. And your mother can watch from the parking lot." That was the moment I knew the wedding wasn't just going to happen. It was going to mean something different than it would have before. Not the beginning of a marriage. The beginning of a boundary. The morning of the wedding, a letter arrived at the venue. No return address. Michelle's handwriting. I opened it in the groom's room while Frank was straightening his tie in the mirror and David was pretending not to be nervous about being around family for the first time in 6 years. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a manipulation. It was something in between that I still don't have a word for. She wrote that she knew what she did was unforgivable. She wrote that Gloria had threatened to tell Robert about the money if she didn't cooperate. She wrote that she tried to say no and couldn't. She wrote that watching Gloria plan the destruction of my wedding felt like watching someone build a bomb in the kitchen while she stood there holding the parts. And she wrote one line at the bottom, separate from the rest, like she'd added it after she thought she was finished. "You got out." I'm still in it. I folded the letter. I put it in my jacket pocket. I walked down the aisle with it against my chest, next to my heartbeat, because I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew I wasn't ready to throw it away. Some letters you don't respond to. Some letters you just carry until you understand what they weigh. Gloria showed up anyway. The day of the wedding, she arrived at the venue in a dress she'd clearly bought for the occasion, heels, jewelry, full makeup. Security stopped her at the entrance. She tried tears first, then authority, then negotiation. "I'm the mother of the groom. You can't keep a mother from her son's wedding. Just let me sit in the back. I won't say anything." Security didn't move. She sat in her car in the parking lot for the entire ceremony. The photographer, taking outdoor shots near the garden, accidentally captured her car in the background of one frame, parked at the edge of the lot, alone, facing the building where her son was getting married without her. It's the only evidence she was there. A silver sedan at the margin of a celebration, as close as she was allowed to get to a life she couldn't control. Frank walked me down the aisle. My father, who has said maybe 300 words total in the 3 decades I've known him, stood at the back of the venue in a suit he'd ironed himself with a crease that was slightly off-center, and he walked his son to the front. The officiant asked, "Who gives this man?" Frank said 6 words I will hear for the rest of my life. His father. Just his father. That's enough. He sat down. 20 feet of aisle. 6 words. 38 years married to a woman who ran the family like a switchboard. And the most powerful thing Frank ever did was walk forward in a slightly crooked suit and say 6 words that didn't include her name. David was there. With Sonia. First time he'd been in a room with family in 6 years. He shook Diane's hand at the reception and said, "Thank you for being smarter than the last girl." Nobody laughed. It wasn't a joke. David and I stood next to each other for most of the evening and didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to. Two brothers who survived the same mother's system, finally in the same room. Robert found out the truth 2 weeks after the wedding. He borrowed Michelle's iPad to show their kids a video and found the fake text app still installed, with 6 draft versions of the fabricated conversations saved. Different approaches, different levels of aggression, different details. Version 1 was too obvious. Version 6 was the one they used. He confronted Michelle that night. She confessed everything, including the reason she couldn't say no. Gloria had been holding something over Michelle for 8 years. The family understood it as a financial secret, that Michelle had taken $12,000 from their parents' emergency savings account to cover a credit card debt Robert didn't know about. Gloria caught her, said nothing to Frank, and held it as leverage. 8 years of silence used as a weapon. 8 years of, remember what I did for you when I could have told everyone. 8 years of compliance purchased with a single secret. Except the $12,000 didn't go where anyone thought it went. When the full truth finally surfaced during the family fallout, it was David who confirmed it. 6 years ago, when Gloria cut David off from the family completely, his daughter needed surgery. Insurance covered most of it, but there was a $12,000 gap, and David had nobody to call because his mother had systematically ensured that every person who loved him believed he was the one who'd walked away. He called Michelle, the only sibling who still picked up, and Michelle sent the money from the emergency fund, secretly, knowing what it would cost her if Gloria found out, knowing that the transfer would leave a trail, knowing that she was trading her own freedom for her niece's health. Gloria found the discrepancy in the account within weeks. She never confronted Michelle publicly. She never told Frank. She just held it. And for 8 years, she used it to make her daughter do whatever she needed done, including fabricating evidence to destroy her son's wedding. She turned the most selfless thing Michelle had ever done, quietly saving a child's life, into a leash she yanked whenever she needed a puppet. David learned this at the wedding reception. I told him in the parking lot because some conversations can't happen inside a celebration. He was quiet for what felt like minutes. Then he said, "She sent me $12,000 when Mom cut me off. That money paid for my daughter's surgery, and Mom turned it into a leash." He stood in the parking lot, in the spot where Gloria's car had been an hour earlier, and he didn't move for a while. I stood next to him. Neither of us said anything else. Some things don't need more words. They just need someone standing beside you while you absorb them. Robert's response was the quietest rebellion in this entire story. He didn't file for divorce. He didn't make a scene. The Saturday after he found out, he put the kids in the car, drove to Frank's garage, and said, "The kids need at least one normal grandparent." Frank, who had been sleeping alone in that garage for months, cleaned up, set out folding chairs, and taught his grandchildren how to change a tire. They talked about lug nuts and oil filters and whether the kids were old enough for go-karts. Nobody mentioned Gloria. Nobody mentioned Michelle. Frank had visitors in his space for the first time in years, and Robert told me later that the sound of those kids laughing in that concrete garage was the first time anything about this family had felt honest in months. 2 months after the wedding, Frank packed a bag. Not a suitcase. A tool bag. He loaded his truck with his socket sets, his workbench clamps, his air compressor, and one framed photo of his 3 children taken when David was 12 and Michelle was 10 and I was 8. Before any of this, before the system was built, before anyone in the photo knew what it would cost to be in this family. He drove to a small apartment he'd rented without telling anyone, a 1-bedroom above a hardware store on the east side that he'd found 3 weeks earlier and signed the lease on without mentioning it to Gloria or anyone else. He left a note on the kitchen counter. I've read it. It said, "I should have stopped you 30 years ago. I didn't. That's on me. But I'm not sleeping in the garage of my own life anymore." He called me that evening. He said, "I found a place. It's small. It's mine." 5 words that carried more weight than anything Frank had said in the 38 years before them. First time I've ever heard my father sound like himself. Not the version of himself that existed inside Gloria's house. Careful and quiet and folded into corners. The real one. The one who sounds like a man who just remembered he's allowed to take up space. Where things stand. Gloria lives alone in the family house. The house is the same. The kitchen is the same. The printer where she printed the script at 6:14 a.m. is still in the office. But the house is empty in a way that square footage can't explain, because the people who used to fill it aren't there anymore, and the one who remains is the reason they left. Michelle is still with Robert. They're in counseling. Robert told me once, on a phone call where neither of us planned to say anything important, $12,000. That's what your mother bought her soul for. I didn't correct him. He's not wrong about the mechanism, even if the truth underneath is more complicated than he knows. Michelle and I don't speak much. Not out of hatred. Out of something heavier. The weight of knowing someone did a terrible thing for a reason that was also a beautiful thing, and not knowing how to hold both at the same time. Keisha's lawyer sent a formal cease and desist to both Michelle and Gloria regarding the unauthorized use of Amara's photos, with the option to pursue civil damages. Last I heard, they're negotiating a settlement somewhere between $8,000 and $15,000, which Gloria will pay because Michelle can't, and because using a stranger's child as a weapon in a family scheme is the kind of thing that costs money when lawyers get involved. David and I talk every week now, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about everything. Sonia sends Diane recipes. Their daughter, the one whose surgery was paid for by the $12,000 that Gloria turned into a leash, is 7 years old and has no idea that a secret her aunt kept saved her life and cost her aunt 8 years of freedom. She'll learn someday. Not today. Frank comes to dinner every Thursday. He brings dessert from a bakery near his new apartment, always something different, like a man who is discovering what he likes for the first time at 63 years old. He doesn't talk about Gloria. He doesn't talk about the note. He talks about his apartment, the new workbench setup he's building, the neighbor who asked him to fix a lawnmower, the bakery owner who gives him an extra pastry because he comes in every week at the same time. He talks like a man who woke up. Diane and I got married. It happened. It was beautiful, in the specific way that things are beautiful when they almost didn't happen and you know exactly how close you came. The photos are on the mantle. One of them, if you look closely at the edge of the frame, shows a silver car parked alone at the far end of the lot. We keep that one because Diane says it reminds her that the truth doesn't care how many weeks you spend building a lie. It only takes one wrong phone number to bring the whole thing down. The script is in my desk drawer. Gloria's handwriting. Talking points for a phone call that was supposed to end my wedding. Frank found it in the printer at 6:14 in the morning, before anyone else was awake. Sometimes I open the drawer and look at it. Not because I need to remember, but because I need to believe it actually happened. That someone sat down before sunrise, wrote stage directions for destroying her son's happiness, annotated the margins with timing notes and emotional cues, and then went downstairs and made breakfast like it was any other Tuesday. Thanks for staying with this one. It was a hard one to tell. Subscribe, share, whatever feels right. I'll be back.